Watch John Mulaney's Steely Dan references confuse Fallon crowd. Comedian John Mulaney paid a visit to The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon on Tuesday night, and he brought two of his favorite topics with him: fatherhood and Steely Dan. "So I love Steely Dan," the comedian proclaimed. "Some people don't like Steely Dan. It's a very divisive band. When I had a son I go, great fresh person. Fresh ears. That's one reason to have a baby, so you can test Steely Dan out on them." The comedian then proceeded to detail his efforts to get his young son interested in the jazz rock band's music. "He loves dancing. My son loves music," Mulaney explained. "So I put on the Steely Dan song, Hey 19. 'Cause that's fun." Typically, Fallon's crowds look for any excuse to cheer pop culture references, like name drops of album or movie titles. However, in this instance they were silent, a fact Mulaney instantly noticed. "Look at all the applause of recognition for Hey 19, the comedian sarcastically remarked before continuing with his anecdote. "I'm staring at Malcolm, he's 9 months old. I turn on Hey 19, he's not dancing. So I change it to the song Gaucho from the album Gaucho." Once again, the audience was totally silent when Mulaney mentioned Steely Dan's 1980 album by name. "Again, folks, sit down. Stop applauding," the comedian quipped, generating some laughs. "I turn on Gaucho, still not dancing. My son looks at me and he says, ayo. And I go, you want to listen to Old MacDonald?" The child nodded and Mulaney responded by playing the nursery rhyme. "So here's what's interesting about that story," the comedian surmised. He had never spoken before. That's how much he hated Steely Dan. Elsewhere in the interview, Mulaney noted that his son has developed an interest in Elvis Presley, to the point that his birthday party had an Elvis theme. "He's a really big Elvis fan," the comedian noted, adding that the boy was riveted while watching the King's 1968 comeback special. "More than any kids' movie, Inside Out, Moana, anything." Staring at Elvis in a leather suit in the late 60s, Steely Dan's confidence kept growing as their songs gained more narrative complexity and musical depth. More than the best moment on Steely Dan's embryonic debut album, Reelin In the Years is their best-loved song. Not that Walter Becker or Donald Fagen ever agreed. "It's dumb but effective," Fagen once told Rolling Stone. Becker added, "It's no fun. Still, good luck resisting that soaring riff." In a sign of things to come, however, it wasn't produced by any of the three very talented guitarists then on Steely Dan's roster: Becker, Denny Dias, and Jeff "Skunk" Baxter. Instead, they brought in Elliot Randall, a ringer who'd originally turned down an offer to join the band. He nailed it almost instantly. "My second pass was what you hear on the record," Randall told guitarist in 2012. "It was completely unedited. It was just from top to bottom, all the way through. And it worked. We all just laughed afterwards." The roots of this song go back to a 4 a.m. pot raid at Bard College in Annandale, New York, where Fagen and Becker originally met. Fagen was outraged to discover that the school cooperated in the investigation by allowing an undercover policeman to be planted in the building and grounds department. "So, when graduation time came, I protested by not going," he later told Entertainment Weekly. "My case had already been dismissed. They had withdrawn the charges, actually, but not before everyone got loaded into a paddy wagon, taken to the station, and then had their long hair cut off." The bust was orchestrated by a youthful DA named G. Gordon Liddy, who'd later become infamous as an operative for the Richard Nixon administration. Fagen vows here to never go back, at least not until California tumbles into the sea, but he did indeed return to his old school. Fagen accepted an honorary doctorate from Bard in 1985. One of Steely Dan's most brilliant casting moments is also one of their best-written songs. "Any World That I'm Welcome To" immediately signals its intention to explore the depths of alienation as Fagen sighs, "If I had my way, I would move to another lifetime." Hal Blaine's old pro cadence draws us ever further in, as Becker and Fagen continued the practice of asking musical heroes over for guest appearances. Jazz bassist Ray Brown appeared on the earlier Razor Boy. Saxist Wayne Shorter later sat in on Aya. Blaine, who played on a stunning 40 chart-topping songs, makes a wonderfully complex contribution, moving with ease from the low-key verses to more up-tempo choruses, and then into eruptive fills and back again. That's why Steely Dan told the brilliant Jeff Porcaro, one of Blaine's clearest airs, to step aside. Considering that Fagen once belonged to a sci-fi book club as a kid, it's perhaps no surprise that Steely Dan returned to space here. What's unique is the setting. Sign and Stranger takes place on a distant penitentiary world where criminals are banished forever. We sort of borrowed the Sin City/Pleasure Planet idea that's in a lot of science fiction novels. Fagen later told the fanzine Metal Leg, and made a song out of it. The corrupt and violent locale fits in seamlessly on the very dark The Royal Scam, which often seems to take specific aim at the phony environs of their transplanted home in Los Angeles. Elliot Randall makes an impressive return, but the song's most notable contributor remains the late pianist Paul Griffin, a Bob Dylan alum whose memorable asides on American Pie likewise almost stole the song from Don McLean. Meanwhile, the overt reggae influences here eventually found their fullest flowering on Becker's Jamaican-inspired 2008 solo album Circus Money. The 8-minute title song to Steely Dan's best-selling album brilliantly combines jazz and rock. But even the fiery interplay between drummer Steve Gadd and saxophonist Wayne Shorter was more the product of studio wizardry than in-studio camaraderie. Gadd recorded his Titanic drum fills live, and he said, in one surprising take no less, with the rest of the legendarily picky members of Steely Dan. Shorter was brought in later and taped his answering solo over their already completed parts. At this point, that had become the norm, rather than the exception. Aya ended up taking a year and a half to record, with studio expenses piling up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We overdubbed a lot of the overdubs over, Becker joked with Cameron Crowe in 1977, and he wasn't really kidding. Still, the extended sessions allowed Fagen and Becker to explore entirely new corners of their self-taught musical minds. The result is a moment like I Run to You on Aya, where the song seems to come totally unmoored. Where else could Steely Dan's journey through the failed West Coast dreams of various deviants, sad sack dopers and doomed optimists conclude than in the midst of a midlife crisis while driving west on Sunset with a pair of hookers? They described this song as late-70s LA Noir in the liner notes to 1995's Alive in America, adding that it had a cool beat. Indeed, Steely Dan's sleaziest single, like all of the more atmospheric, less groove-oriented gaucho, is so sleekly produced that it's easily mistaken for light jazz. There's no guitar solo at all, leaving plenty of room for an all-star group of backup vocalists including Patty Austin and Valerie Simpson to belt out the title over Bernard Purdie's patented shuffle. Still, as the song reminds, those Santa Ana winds loom. Also known as devil winds, they're infamous for fanning small fires into landscape-engulfing infernos. It was true for both that guy on Sunset and for Steely Dan. They burned through another pile of money as these sessions were slowed by endless tinkering, bouts of writer's block, a lawsuit, and a descent into drugs. That led to a split that lasted for more than a decade. Steely Dan commanded a newfound respectability when their long-awaited comeback album won multiple Grammy Awards, but that didn't mean they were all grown up. Cousin Dupree, which focuses on a deadbeat who'd like to bed one of his cousins, makes that clear. Honey, how you've grown, Fagen sings with a lascivious glee. Well, we used to play when we were 3. How about a kiss for your cousin Dupree? Meanwhile, when they weren't making unwanted overtures to family members, Steely Dan was taking part in a public, though clearly good-natured, spat with Owen Wilson. They jokingly accused the actor of swiping the premise for the 2006 movie You, Me, and Dupree. Wilson came back with his own deadpan defense. I have never heard the song Cousin Dupree, and I don't even know who this gentleman Mr. Steely Dan is. I hope this helps to clear things up, and I can get back to concentrating on my new movie, HUI-19. Greenbrook is driven along by some by now familiar elements, including dueling solos between Becker and Fagen, and a jazz-inflected bridge that harkens back to the days of Aya. The protagonist is still looking for cheap sex too. Only now he's immersed in the world of virtual reality interactive porn. We imagine a pornography beyond online pornography. A pornography involving some sort of magical remote viewing, Becker told Barney Hoskins in 2003. Yet some very human emotions remain. Becker rightly noted that the song flirts somewhere on the borderline between jealousy and intense arousal. Yet, even as Fagen's protagonist attempts to assemble a newfangled Marilyn Monroe in this cyberspace meat market, they return to their old ways in the studio. Becker's guitar solos were recorded first. Fagen reportedly laid down his intermingling synthesizer.